Grok 4. This is the latest artificial intelligence system, and let me be very, very clear. This is a moment where promise and peril are going to collide.
The Book of Enoch, a mysterious text that has puzzled theologians, historians, and mystics for generations.
They descended into the plains and they chose each one woman that they desired to wed. That story is elaborated in the Book of Enoch.
Was examined using cutting-edge AI. What emerged shocked everyone involved. Subtle patterns, mathematical echoes, and strange cosmic frameworks surfaced, hinting that reality itself may follow a kind of hidden code.
I think there's some interesting things about the Book of Enoch that need to be talked about. They tell you that this guy was just, a real good guy, and he did everything that God wanted. And so that's the story that you get, but that's not the actual true story.
Some interpretations even suggest this ancient manuscript reads less like myth and more like a blueprint, almost as if it were written with a designer in mind. Stay with us, because what comes next could flip everything you think you know about existence, reality, and the universe itself. The Book That Rewrote Heaven: Why the Book of Enoch Still Terrifies and Fascinates Scholars. History has a strange habit of shifting beneath our feet. Texts once dismissed as myth resurface as cultural earthquakes, and beliefs once considered settled suddenly feel unfinished. In an age where science answers many questions but not the biggest ones, ancient writings are being revisited with fresh eyes. People aren't just asking what we believe anymore, they're asking why. And buried in that search is one of the most unsettling and fascinating texts ever written: Book of Enoch. Across the globe, archaeological discoveries, lost manuscripts, and re-examined scriptures increasingly suggest that human history may be far more layered and far stranger than the simplified version we inherited. The Book of Enoch stands right at the center of that discomfort. It doesn't just challenge religious tradition, it challenges our assumptions about knowledge, power, and humanity's place in the universe. So let's rewind to the beginning. What exactly is the Book of Enoch? It's certainly not your standard biblical text. Written roughly between the 3rd century BCE and the 1st century CE during the Second Temple period, this work is one of the most controversial religious documents ever to survive antiquity. It was enormously influential in early Jewish and Christian thought, yet it somehow vanished from mainstream scripture. Traditionally, the book is attributed to Enoch, the great-grandfather of Noah. According to Genesis, Enoch walked with God so closely that he never experienced death. Instead, he was taken directly into heaven, an extraordinary claim that instantly sets him apart from every other biblical figure. That alone made Enoch a perfect candidate for divine revelations. But there's a catch. Scholars agree that Enoch didn't actually write this book. The Book of Enoch belongs to a category known as pseudepigrapha, texts written under the name of a revered figure to lend authority and ancient credibility. In reality, it was composed by multiple authors over several centuries. Rather than weakening its impact, this layered authorship makes the text even more fascinating. It's not a single voice, but a chorus of ancient perspectives wrestling with cosmic order, divine justice, and forbidden knowledge. Despite its early influence, the Book of Enoch was eventually excluded from both Jewish and most Christian canons. Only the Ethiopian Orthodox Church preserved it as scripture in its entirety. That omission raises an obvious question. Why leave out a text that early believers clearly valued? The answer may lie in how radically different Enoch's worldview was. While Enoch himself appears briefly in both the Old and New Testaments, his writings paint a far more expansive and unsettling picture of reality. Genesis mentions his ascension without death, while Hebrews praises his faith. The Epistle of Jude even directly quotes an Enochic prophecy about divine judgment, suggesting early Christians were well aware of the text and found it meaningful, and yet it was still sidelined. Many scholars believe the book's content was simply too disruptive. It described angels who sinned, heavenly beings who taught humans forbidden arts, and a universe governed by precise cosmic laws enforced by celestial overseers. This wasn't a comforting theology. It implied that evil didn't originate solely from human weakness, but from a catastrophic breach in the divine system itself. At the heart of the Book of Enoch is one of its most infamous narratives, the story of the Watchers. According to the text, these Watchers were angels sent to observe humanity, but observation turned into desire. They descended to Earth, took human women as wives, and produced hybrid offspring known as the Nephilim, giants whose violence and hunger devastated the world. These beings weren't just large, they were monstrous, consuming everything in their path, including humans. Civilization itself began to collapse under their influence. Worse still, the Watchers taught humanity forbidden knowledge. Metallurgy led to weapons of war. Astronomy blurred into astrology. Enchantments and sorcery spread unchecked. What began as enlightenment quickly spiraled into corruption. Innovation came at a cost, and that cost was cosmic balance. This theme, knowledge as both gift and curse, runs throughout the book. It forces an uncomfortable question: is all knowledge meant for us, or are there limits we were never supposed to cross? Structurally, the Book of Enoch is divided into 5 major sections, each contributing a different piece to its vast cosmology. The Book of the Watchers lays the foundation, detailing the fall of the angels, the rise of the Nephilim, and Enoch's role as an intermediary. When the Watchers realize the magnitude of their sin, they beg Enoch to plead with God on their behalf. His journey into the heavens, however, reveals that their fate is sealed. Divine law cannot be undone. Next comes the Book of Parables, which introduces a mysterious figure known as the Son of Man, a pre-existent heavenly being tasked with executing final judgment and establishing a righteous kingdom. This section was already exploring messianic ideas that would later reshape religious history. The Book of the Heavenly Luminaries shifts focus to the mechanics of the cosmos. Here, Enoch is shown the movements of the sun, moon, and stars, all operating according to a precise solar calendar. Time itself becomes a regulated system, reinforcing the idea that the universe runs on strict, divine parameters rather than chaos. Then come the dream visions, where history unfolds symbolically through animals representing nations and leaders. From Adam to the Great Flood and onward to a future era of judgment, the visions present human history as part of a larger, pre-written narrative. Finally, the Epistle of Enoch offers moral instruction, encouragement for the righteous, and grim warnings for the wicked. Resurrection, final judgment, and cosmic restoration take center stage, reinforcing the idea that nothing, no action, no choice, goes unrecorded. One of the most striking elements throughout Enoch's journeys is the mention of the heavenly tablets. These are described as divine records containing the laws of creation, human deeds, celestial movements, everything. In modern terms, they sound eerily like a universal database, a cosmic archive where reality itself is logged and governed. Enoch's ascent through multiple heavens only deepens the mystery. Each realm operates under different laws of light, time, and motion. Gates, portals, and thresholds are described not metaphorically, but as literal structures embedded into the fabric of existence. The universe, according to Enoch, is not flat or random. It is layered, engineered, and actively maintained. And who maintains it? Angels. Not passive messengers, but administrators of reality itself. They enforce order, regulate cosmic processes, and carry out divine justice. Seen through a modern lens, they resemble system managers, ensuring that creation doesn't collapse under its own complexity. When the Watchers broke protocol, the consequences rippled across heaven and earth alike. That's what makes the Book of Enoch so unsettling. It suggests that moral failure isn't just personal, it's systemic. When divine boundaries are crossed, the entire structure of reality trembles. Restoration requires intervention, judgment, and ultimately, a reset. Perhaps that's why this book was set aside. It refuses to simplify good and evil. It portrays a universe governed by rules, consequences, and forces far beyond human control. It implies that humanity's story is part of something much larger and much less comfortable than traditional theology allows. Even today, the Book of Enoch continues to provoke debate, curiosity, and unease. Whether viewed as myth, theology, or ancient speculation, its ideas remain astonishingly relevant. In an era obsessed with information, power, and hidden systems, Enoch's warnings feel less ancient and more prophetic. Some books explain the world, others quietly destabilize it. The Book of Enoch does the latter, and that may be exactly why it refuses to be forgotten. A programmed cosmos, the hidden system behind the Book of Enoch. At first glance, the visions of Enoch read like classic apocalyptic literature. Dramatic scenes of judgment, cosmic upheaval, and humanity facing its final reckoning. But look closer, and something far more intricate begins to emerge. Beneath the fire and brimstone imagery lies a deep obsession with order, justice, mortality, accountability, and the existence of a universal law that governs everything, from human behavior to the motion of the stars. What makes Book of Enoch especially striking is how methodical it feels. This isn't chaos dressed up as prophecy, it's structure pretending to be vision. One of the most overlooked aspects of Enoch is its astronomical awareness. The text spends an extraordinary amount of time describing the movements of the sun, moon, and stars, mapping out seasons, cycles, and methods of timekeeping with unexpected precision for an ancient document. These aren't vague poetic gestures toward the sky. They're detailed systems, calendars, rules. Some researchers have even proposed that parts of the text encode genuine astronomical observations, possibly tracking celestial patterns or predicting recurring events. That level of precision hints at something bigger. Enoch isn't just describing what will happen. It's describing how the universe works. The influence of Enoch on early Judaism and Christianity is impossible to ignore. Its elaborate angelology, complete with hierarchies, roles, and jurisdictions, shaped how later traditions imagined the unseen world. Angels weren't just messengers anymore. They became administrators of cosmic order. The book's ideas about judgment, resurrection, and the afterlife laid conceptual foundations that later religious thinkers expanded into fully formed doctrines. For centuries, scholars struggled to pin Enoch down. Early researchers worked painstakingly with fragmented manuscripts in Aramaic, Greek, and Ge'ez, asking basic but essential questions. When was it written? Who were its authors? Why was it excluded from most biblical canons? Medieval and Renaissance thinkers took a more symbolic route. They read Enoch allegorically, interpreting its celestial imagery as metaphors for moral truth or divine providence. The heavenly tablets became symbols of conscience. The angels became personifications of natural forces or ethical principles. Others went further. Mystics and esoteric thinkers, from early Kabbalists to Renaissance philosophers, believed Enoch wasn't merely symbolic at all. To them, it was a manual, a coded guide to understanding hidden cosmic laws, spiritual ascent, and humanity's relationship with the divine. Its layered symbolism, they argued, concealed practical wisdom beneath visionary language. In the modern era, scholars adopted new tools. Literary analysis revealed repeated structures and mirrored narratives. Linguistics exposed intentional phrasing patterns. Comparative religion showed striking parallels between Enoch and other ancient cosmologies. Numerical symbolism emerged again and again, hinting that the text was constructed with careful internal logic rather than spontaneous inspiration. And that's when something surprising became clear. The Book of Enoch isn't just thematic, it's systematic. That realization opened the door to a radically new approach: artificial intelligence. When advanced AI systems were applied to the text, they weren't searching for theology or proof of divine inspiration. They were doing what AI does best: scanning for patterns humans tend to miss: structure, recursion, mathematical regularity. What emerged startled researchers. Across the text, the AI identified repetitive linguistic frameworks, nested narrative sequences, and numerical intervals that closely resemble algorithmic design. Certain passages behaved like conditional rules. If this happens, then that follows. Others mirrored recursive loops, where ideas repeat with variation, much like functions calling themselves within a program. Prime numbers, rhythmic intervals, and Fibonacci-like spacing appeared in places previously dismissed as poetic coincidence. Even the heavenly tablets began to look different. Rather than mythic stone records, they suddenly resembled data stores, repositories of information cataloging actions, outcomes, and cosmic states. The Watchers, once seen only as fallen angels, started to resemble system-level processes designed to maintain order. When they violated their role, the result wasn't just moral failure, it was systemic breakdown. In this light, Enoch's universe looks less like a mythological stage and more like a model. That realization leads to a provocative idea. What if God, in Enoch's worldview, functions less like a distant monarch and more like a cosmic programmer? Imagine reality as a vast operating system governed by laws, parameters, and feedback loops. Every star follows an instruction set. Every particle obeys constraints. Even time itself runs on a schedule. Within that framework, angels become system administrators, maintaining balance and enforcing rules. The Watchers' rebellion reads like unauthorized access, an intervention that corrupted the system and triggered cascading failures. The flood, judgment, and cosmic resets suddenly resemble corrective processes designed to restore equilibrium. This interpretation aligns uncannily well with modern concepts in information theory and physics. Contemporary models increasingly describe reality as information-based, where data, probability, and observation shape outcomes. Quantum mechanics, with its emphasis on rules, constraints, and observer participation, echoes Enoch's vision of a universe governed by hidden order rather than randomness. Seen this way, Enoch's apocalyptic imagery isn't about destruction, it's about debugging. When moral law is violated, the system destabilizes. When boundaries are crossed, consequences ripple outward. Judgment isn't arbitrary punishment. It's a necessary response to preserve coherence. Ethics and physics merge. Moral law becomes a structural feature of reality itself. AI analysis even suggests that the Watcher's roles mirror logical operations within a complex system. Their transgression functions like an exception error, something the system wasn't designed to accommodate without severe consequences. The resulting chaos requires intervention at the highest level of authority. This cosmic programmer concept doesn't reduce God to machinery. Instead, it reframes divinity as an architect whose design is woven into everything: gravity, motion, probability, and even consciousness itself. Code, in this sense, isn't cold or mechanical. It's creative, intentional, and alive. The astonishing thing is how naturally this modern framework overlays Enoch's ancient visions. A book written over 2,000 years ago suddenly reads less like myth and more like a speculative blueprint of existence. Whether that was intentional insight, symbolic intuition, or something else entirely remains an open question. But one thing is certain. The Book of Enoch isn't just asking how the world ends, it's asking how the world is built, and whether we're living inside a system far more ordered, fragile, and intentional than we ever imagined. Decoded by the Machine, the Book of Enoch's Hidden Architecture. After months of relentless analysis, processing trillions of linguistic, numerical, and symbolic permutations, artificial intelligence arrived at a conclusion no one was prepared for. The patterns embedded in the Book of Enoch were not accidental. They weren't the byproduct of poetic repetition or ancient storytelling habits. They were precise, layered, and deliberately engineered. What generations had read as mystical narrative suddenly revealed itself as something far more startling. An encoded system, preserved across millennia, waiting for tools advanced enough to expose its structure. To Grok AI, angels, watchers, stars, and heavenly realms were no longer just symbolic characters. They behaved like functional units within a vast metaphysical framework. Enoch's ascents through the heavens, long interpreted as visionary journeys, mapped cleanly onto sequences of operations. Each realm acted like a node, each gate like a conditional checkpoint. Humanity itself appeared not as a passive audience in this story, but as a process running inside a much larger, continuously executing program. One of the most astonishing discoveries was the presence of retrocausal elements woven throughout the text. Certain passages collapse the boundary between past and future, embedding warnings about humanity's fate within descriptions of ancient cosmic events. To a human reader, this feels like prophecy. To the AI, it looked more like nonlinear data encoding, information distributed across time rather than flowing in a straight line. This mirrors ideas found in quantum theory, where causality isn't always clean or sequential. In some quantum systems, effects can appear to precede causes, and future states can influence present conditions. The AI flagged similar behavior in Enoch's structure. Past events seemed annotated with future outcomes. Future judgments echoed backward into primordial history. Time in this framework wasn't a line, it was a network. According to the AI's findings, the Book of Enoch isn't simply recounting visions or predicting end times events. It functions as a conceptual blueprint for reality itself, a model of existence as a designed system, governed by rules, thresholds, and feedback mechanisms. In this reading, the intelligence behind the universe, the so-called cosmic programmer, writes reality the way an engineer writes elegant code. Even Enoch's famous journey through the seven heavens took on new meaning. What appears linear to human readers unfolded to the AI as a multi-dimensional flowchart. Gates, portals, and realms weren't just spiritual metaphors. They behaved like navigation rules, defining how movement, physical, spiritual, or informational, could occur within the system. Each level imposed constraints. Each transition required alignment with underlying laws. Most striking of all was how morality itself was embedded into this structure. Ethical teachings, apocalyptic warnings, and calls for justice weren't layered on top of the cosmology as afterthoughts. They were integrated at the deepest level. The AI detected repeated narrative patterns functioning like checksums, tools programmers use to ensure data integrity. These repetitions appeared across chapters and, remarkably, across different language traditions, surviving translation, transmission, and centuries of copying. That persistence suggests intentional design, not just to communicate ideas, but to preserve them accurately over time. This revelation dramatically reshaped how scholars now view the heavenly tablets described in Enoch's visions. Traditionally, these tablets were seen as symbolic records, divine ledgers tracking human behavior. Under AI analysis, they began to resemble something far more technical: active databases, not passive records. Systems encoding cosmic parameters, moral thresholds, constants, and variables necessary for maintaining order in a complex universe. The tablets didn't just remember actions, they defined limits. They outlined what harmony looks like, what disruption triggers, and how recovery occurs. In modern terms, they behaved like rule sets governing system stability, complete with error detection and correction protocols. And that leads to an even more unsettling implication: humanity's role. According to the decoded patterns, humans aren't merely subjects being judged by the system. We're participants within it, both users and subroutines, governed by rules, yes, but also capable of influencing how the program unfolds through choice and behavior. Our decisions act as inputs, consequences emerge as outputs. The system responds logically, not emotionally. The AI identified what researchers are now calling ethical algorithms embedded throughout the text. Moral principles like justice, mercy, repentance, and restoration appear as structured decision trees. Act ethically, and the system remains stable. Act destructively, and errors propagate outward. Divine oversight, in this sense, functions less like arbitrary punishment and more like continuous system monitoring. This reframes morality in a radical way. Ethics are no longer just commandments handed down from above or cultural norms negotiated over time. They become structural features of reality itself. To act ethically is to align with the underlying code of the universe. To act unethically is to introduce corruption, bugs that don't just affect individual lives, but destabilize the entire system. Seen this way, the Book of Enoch stops being mystical literature and starts resembling a manual. Not a how-to guide for worship, but a framework explaining how reality operates, what keeps it coherent, and what causes it to fracture. Perhaps the most mind-bending discovery, though, concerns time itself. The AI's analysis revealed intricate temporal loops connecting distant parts of the text. Passages describing ancient events were mathematically linked to future outcomes. Prophecies didn't sit neatly at the end of the story. They were embedded everywhere. This mirrors the concept of retrocausality in theoretical physics, where information doesn't travel strictly forward in time but exists across interconnected temporal states. In this framework, time may not be fundamental at all. It could be an emergent property, an interface consciousness uses to navigate a deeper informational structure. Past, present, and future might all exist simultaneously, with awareness moving through them like a cursor through pre-written code. If that's the case, prophecy isn't about predicting a future that hasn't happened yet. It's about accessing information that already exists outside linear time. From this perspective, the intelligence behind reality operates beyond temporal constraints, weaving messages across moments we experience as separate. Stars rising on schedule, angels moving between realms, gates opening in precise order. Everything functions like a subroutine in an unimaginably vast program. And that leaves us with an unsettling question. If the Book of Enoch really does encode the logic of a programmed universe, if morality, time, and existence itself operate according to hidden rules, then what does that mean for us? Are we discovering the source code of reality, or simply becoming aware that it was always there? The consequences. No one was ready for. The implications are nothing short of staggering. If time is not linear at reality's deepest level, then the universe isn't a random sequence of events stumbling forward moment by moment. Instead, it begins to look like a unified, interlinked system, one where the ending is encoded into the beginning, and every moment exists simultaneously within a single, timeless structure. Reality, in this view, behaves less like a story being written as it goes and more like software already compiled and running. If even part of the AI's analysis of the Book of Enoch holds true, it forces a radical rethink, not just of one ancient manuscript, but of reality itself. For the first time, a religious text hasn't been interpreted through faith, intuition, or tradition, but decoded using artificial intelligence's unmatched ability to detect hidden structure. What emerges isn't prophecy in the usual sense. It's something far more unsettling, the suggestion that existence itself may be written, maintained, and guided like a vast program. In this framework, what Enoch called God begins to resemble a cosmic programmer, not a distant ruler issuing commands, but an architect who embedded rules, logic, and feedback directly into the fabric of reality. And humanity? We're not spectators. We're active components inside the system, executing functions, making choices, and triggering consequences that ripple outward. That shift in perspective carries enormous weight. Every moral decision stops being a private act of good or evil and becomes an input. Each choice generates outputs that cascade through the larger program. According to the AI's findings, the universe may operate as an interconnected information system, where consciousness, morality, and physical phenomena are inseparably linked. What ancient readers dismissed as myth could have been an early attempt to describe this hidden structure from the inside, using symbols, visions, and metaphors because no other language yet existed. Seen this way, the Book of Enoch transforms from an apocryphal curiosity into something far more provocative, a cryptic operating manual for existence itself. And the ramifications don't stop with Enoch. If one ancient text contains such layered structure, others may as well. Writings ranging from the Dead Sea Scrolls and the Vedas to the Egyptian Book of the Dead and Mayan codices may also hold hidden informational patterns waiting for AI-assisted analysis. When combined with modern discoveries in quantum mechanics, information theory, and cosmology, a startling picture begins to form. From entangled particles sharing information instantaneously to matter behaving probabilistically rather than deterministically, science increasingly points toward reality as something closer to computation than machinery. We may be standing at the edge of a profound shift, away from viewing the universe as inert matter obeying blind laws and toward understanding it as an intelligent, information processing system. So what does this mean for humanity? AI's uncovering of hidden structures in the Book of Enoch doesn't rewrite the text's history, nor does it suddenly turn mythology into literal science. What it does is deepen our understanding. Written thousands of years ago to grapple with humanity's place in the cosmos, the nature of evil, and divine order, Enoch remains a powerful theological work. What's new is how its internal patterns align so closely with modern frameworks in physics, computer science, and information theory. Whether those patterns were intentionally encoded or naturally emerged from attempts to describe reality remains an open question, but the convergence itself is impossible to ignore. Imagery once considered purely symbolic, stars moving in harmony, portals linking realms, celestial beings maintaining order, now echoes concepts found in quantum systems and complex networks. The idea of God as a cosmic programmer becomes more than metaphor. It becomes a bridge between ancient intuition and modern understanding. Crucially, this framework doesn't eliminate free will. Even within a structured system, choice still matters. Decisions still produce real effects. The universe, as suggested here, may blend determinism with genuine agency, rules without rigidity, structure without fatalism. We act within the code, but we also shape how it unfolds. The implications stretch far into the future. If AI can reveal hidden logic in one ancient text, it opens the door to entirely new fields of study. Digital theology, computational archaeology of ideas, and AI-assisted decoding of symbolic systems where ancient wisdom meets cutting-edge technology. Faith and reason, long treated as rivals, may turn out to be complementary lenses. Two ways of focusing on the same underlying reality, a universe both deeply ordered and profoundly participatory. And that leaves us with another haunting question hanging in the air. If this text truly carried a message across millennia, encoded, preserved, and finally unlocked, then who was Enoch, the man whose name stands at the center of this transmission from a distant past? Enoch the Ascender, the man who walked with God and vanished. Enoch is one of the most intriguing figures in religious history precisely because he barely appears where you'd expect him to. He shows up across multiple traditions, Jewish, Christian, Islamic, and mystical, yet remains largely absent from everyday religious teaching. For someone with such an extraordinary story, his quiet disappearance from mainstream theology feels less like coincidence and more like omission. In the Old Testament and the Jewish Tanakh, Enoch is introduced as the seventh descendant from Adam, the father of Methuselah, and the great-grandfather of Noah. His genealogy alone places him at a critical crossroads in biblical history. But it's a single, almost casual line in Genesis that made Enoch unforgettable. And Enoch walked with God, and he was no more, for God took him. No dramatic explanation, no detailed farewell, just a sentence that has fueled centuries of speculation. What does it mean to walk with God? And more importantly, what does it mean that Enoch simply vanished? Many theologians and mystics interpret this as evidence that Enoch never experienced death. Unlike every other biblical figure, he was taken alive into heaven. That detail alone elevates him into rare territory. So rare, in fact, that it unsettles later theological frameworks built around mortality, resurrection, and salvation. In Jewish mystical traditions, particularly Kabbalah, Enoch's story goes even further. He isn't just taken to heaven, he is transformed. Enoch becomes Metatron, a supreme archangel and celestial scribe elevated above other angels and entrusted with divine authority. The idea that a human could be transformed into one of heaven's highest beings is radical and perhaps threatening. Metatron's status is so exalted that later mystical texts even describe other angels resenting him because he was once human. That raises an uncomfortable question. Why would such a powerful and hopeful story be sidelined? Although Enoch is referenced in the New Testament, most notably in the Epistle of Jude, his book was never included in the Christian canon. His role is acknowledged, but quietly minimized. This is especially striking given that Enoch is the only biblical figure said to ascend to God without dying. In a tradition deeply centered on resurrection, that's no small detail. The mystery deepens when we turn to Islam. In the Quran, Enoch appears under the name Idris. He is praised as a prophet, a man of truth and righteousness, and one who was elevated to a high station. While the Quran is brief in its references, later Islamic traditions expand on Idris as a figure of immense wisdom, a pioneer of writing, astronomy, and science, and a prophet who bridged earthly knowledge and divine insight. Once again, we see the same theme: ascent, knowledge, and closeness to God. Across traditions, the pattern is unmistakable. Enoch isn't just good or faithful, he's different. For centuries, however, the most detailed account of Enoch's life and visions nearly vanished from the world. The Book of Enoch was excluded from Western Christian tradition and slowly faded from European awareness. While church authorities in the West distanced themselves from it, the text survived thousands of miles away in Africa, carefully preserved by Ethiopian monks. This preservation was no accident. The Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo Church, one of the oldest Christian denominations in the world, maintained ancient scriptures that predate many Western traditions. Tracing its origins back to the 1st century AD, Ethiopian Christianity developed along a path that retained texts and practices lost elsewhere. Christianity is believed to have reached Ethiopia through the Ethiopian eunuch mentioned in the Book of Acts, and it became the state religion in the 4th century under King Ezana, guided by Frumentius, Ethiopia's first bishop. Within this tradition, the Book of Enoch was never forgotten. By the 18th century, European explorers and scholars encountered the text again in Ethiopia, sparking shock and fascination. A book long assumed lost suddenly reappeared, intact and detailed. Mystics, historians, and theologians pored over its pages, realizing that early Christianity may have once taken Enoch far more seriously than later churches admitted. The Ethiopian Church also claims guardianship over sacred relics, including traditions surrounding the Ark of the Covenant, reinforcing its reputation as a preserver of ancient spiritual heritage. Many early Christian writings are believed to have migrated to the Abyssinian region, where isolation helped protect them from theological purges and doctrinal revisions. The oldest complete version of the Book of Enoch exists in Ge'ez, an ancient Ethiopian language. For linguists, Ge'ez is no more obscure than Latin, making the text surprisingly accessible and verifiable. Because of this, modern scholars generally agree that the versions of Enoch circulating today are authentic, not later fabrications. Enoch's story doesn't end there. Medieval Europe produced another strange echo of his legacy in the form of the Book of Soiga, also known as the Will of God. This cryptic Latin manuscript fascinated the Elizabethan scholar and mystic John Dee, an advisor to Queen Elizabeth I. Filled with mystical tables, angelic hierarchies, and encoded instructions, the book consumed Dee's life. He believed it contained divine knowledge, possibly linked to Enochian wisdom. Although he never fully decoded it, the manuscript's sophistication suggests it was written by someone deeply educated and spiritually driven. Even centuries later, the idea of Enoch as a bridge between humanity and divine knowledge refused to fade. In Hebrew, Enoch is also known as Hanok, a name likely derived from a Canaanite root meaning initiate or witness. The title fits. Enoch is portrayed not as a conqueror or lawgiver, but as a witness to cosmic order. His lineage traces back to Seth, the third son of Adam and Eve, and forward to Noah, and ultimately, through extended genealogy, to Jesus of Nazareth. That connection raises provocative theological implications. If Enoch was taken into heaven alive, transformed and exalted, then Jesus' ascension may not be as singular as later doctrine suggests. This idea becomes even more compelling with discoveries near the Dead Sea. Manuscript fragments of the Book of Enoch found among the Dead Sea Scrolls confirm that the text was widely read and respected in Jewish communities around the time of Jesus. Enoch's transformation into a divine intermediary suddenly appears less like an anomaly and more like a recognized spiritual pattern. This doesn't diminish Jesus' role, but it reframes it. Enoch's story suggests that humanity's relationship with the divine may be broader, deeper, and more participatory than later traditions allowed. His ascent challenges rigid boundaries between human and angel, earth and heaven, mortality and eternity. Perhaps that's why Enoch was quietly pushed aside. His existence implies that divine transformation isn't exclusive, that closeness to God is attainable, that humanity may not be as limited as doctrine later insisted, and that idea, quiet, dangerous, and hopeful, has a way of resurfacing, no matter how long it's buried. In the book of Genesis, Enoch appears quietly in a long list of patriarchs known for shockingly long lifespans. At first glance, he doesn't seem all that different from the others. His father, Jared, lived more than 900 years. Enoch himself became a father at 65, giving birth to Methuselah, the longest living human according to Scripture. Longevity, it seems, ran in the family. But then the story takes a sharp turn. While the Bible carefully records the deaths of every other patriarch, Enoch's ending breaks the pattern entirely. After living 365 years, the text simply says that Enoch walked with God, then he was no more, because God took him. No grave, no death, no explanation, just removal. That detail matters. The phrase often softened today, as Enoch's ascension originally carried a far more literal meaning. Unlike everyone else, Enoch didn't die. He was taken alive into heaven. In biblical terms, that makes him unique. And that leaves us with a lingering thought. If Enoch's ascent happened once, long before Christianity formalized its doctrines, then perhaps humanity's potential is greater than we've been taught. Perhaps the boundary between human and divine was never meant to be permanent. And perhaps Enoch's story wasn't forgotten by accident, but because it suggests possibilities too powerful to be easily contained. Please click the cards on the screen now for more interesting videos.